So we're going to talk about the shot tube assembly and where it connects on the gun and how it works. We have a breakaway 499 here. Here you can see your plunger tube, your compression or abutment plug, and the end of the shot tube right there where it threads into the gun. The gun works like this. You cock it, and then the spring is cocked. You can see that this is about a 2-inch area of your compression area, and when you pull the trigger, that creates the air pressure that propels the BB. There are a couple important things to know about the shot tube. A, it's in these 3 pieces. This plastic piece, you'll need quite a few of those spares because those tend to break. It's one of the most common things that happens. All of a sudden you lose velocity, lose accuracy. You start turning the sights up to try to get it to hit the target and it's not working. Somehow you've cracked your shot tube, or your plastic tube on your shot tube. The way it holds itself together, there's some knurling right there. This is a force or a compression cone. Those go together. This tightens on there and snugs things up. Hand tight is what you want to do there, or just the slightest mechanical pressure to hold that in place. But the danger is if you get this too tight. So your shot tube comes in 3 pieces. The shot tube, the muzzle plug, and the nut with the forcing cone. If you over tighten that, you'll get a crack right in there, and that will cause you all kinds of trouble. You can tighten that by hand, and that will hold if everything else is properly fit into the gun. This is the abutment plug that is hidden clear down inside the gun, and it has the little tiny magnet right here. And when you click, it would drop a BB in and hear it click. That's what it's clicking onto, is this magnet. So here's the disaster that can happen to that little magnet. Let's assume this is your plug down in the gun, and you went to the gun store and bought a 17 caliber cleaning kit, and it has this little spiked plug on there, which is really handy for holding the cloth cleaning piece. So you run that down in your gun, and that little spike thing knocks the magnet out of your abutment plug. Your gun is now ruined because that is almost impossible to replace properly. Actually, you can buy the whole shroud piece for $25 and start again. Do not use a spiked jag to clean your shot tube. The best way to clean a shot tube is take the shot tube out of the gun. It simply unscrews. Clean it with a bristle brush, perhaps put a little paper towel around there. Clean it out. Then the shot tube screws back into the gun. And now we're getting to one of the best accuracy tips for a 499B. The shot tube needs to fit properly. Right now the shot tube is out a little ways and it will wiggle. If there's any wiggle at all between the shroud and the muzzle plug, you won't get accuracy. A properly fit shot tube will just snug up very nicely with finger pressure. If you use a tool like a pliers to try to crank that tighter, this abutment plug will break loose inside your gun, and it's the same effect as having knocked the magnet out. That's a broken gun, and that's really tough to fix. Finger tension, proper fit. It's not unusual to see a shot tube assembly come and it's a little bit too long. In that case, you'll have to remove metal, usually about 5 to 10 thousandths. You can just file it off the threaded end down there and get your shot tube so it just snugs up nice and stays. According to the rule book, we are allowed to put a piece of tape, of non-reflective tape on our 499 to cut off glare. It's real handy to have the tape also cover this area of your shot tube on the shroud to keep that in place. I have found that during target practice and sandbag work, a quarter of a turn tension on that shot tube will do two scoring rings. So it's very important that you get that thing snugged in properly and that it stays in exactly the same place. On the subject of shot tubes, not all shot tubes are created equal. There's good ones and there's bad ones. This is my current supply that we buy about 6 of them a year for the club, test fire them, and try to find those that are match grade accuracy. If our club guns can't hold the 10 ring for 3/4 of the shots, that's not going to be competitive. 2 weekends ago, the winning scores at the Kimball meet were 380, 381, and 384 out of a possible 400. Those guns are accurate, match grade guns that can shoot and win a state championship. Not every shot tube is capable of that. I have tried polishing them internally. Haven't figured out how to make that work. Best I can say is send Daisy some money and buy some spare shot tubes, sort through and find the best one, testing over sandbags. If you're at a match, you'll notice that an awful lot of the coaches drop the BB in and then put their ear over the end of it and listen to the BB drop down through the shot tube. What they're listening to is how fast the BB drops. The faster it drops, that means the less tightly that BB fits. It takes a very small clearance between the BB and the shot tube to make an accurate shot. Buy the best BBs you can buy. Find a shot tube where they drop real slow. But you always have to have that BB go all the way down to the abutment plug and you hear it click on that magnet. If you don't hear it click, push a little stick down the barrel to be sure that BB is seated all the way down. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the plunger assembly and what you can do to change it to increase the accuracy of your 499. The best guns have had the compression chamber inside the gun polished. So we're going to remove the plunger assembly from the gun. Now this is an older style assembly. The newest ones have a little foam ring that they put around there, supposedly to help keep dust and help keep the assembly clean. Haven't had enough experience to know if I love those or not. The other factor on plunger assemblies is the spring itself. Every good armorer's kit, you're going to have several spare springs to try because they can and do get weak and fail. I've seen some experimenting with trying to make guns shoot more accurately by making the springs harder, and I've seen no increase in accuracy by making them shoot faster or harder. I'm pretty sure that when Daisy and Avanti engineered this, that they're at that real good 340 to 350% or 50 foot per second accuracy standard. One thing that you can do is polish the internal of the combustion chamber. If we look inside of our breakaway gun, your compression chamber is right there where your spring is working, deep down inside the gun. Keeping in mind that this whole shroud piece, including the combustion chamber, the front sight assembly and all that, is like a $25 piece that is spot welded. So here is where your abutment plug is tacked into place. So sitting just about right here is where your compression plug is sitting inside the gun. The abutment plug is only held in place by these two little detents holding right on this area. That's what makes it so fragile. Your compression area is about this much of the compression chamber, and the rest of it is a rougher area. So I made a tool to hold a piece of sandpaper that will insert into the compression plug area. And if you look at where I have this tape, right now the bottom of my plug is not into the vital area. When it gets all the way to there, that's where I want to do my polishing. When I get to about there, then I'm only making the path through the folded sheet metal that my compression plug passes through. I've seen a lot of guns that are real rough in this upper area, especially where like the key goes through. There can be sharp edges on there that can roughen up your compression plug and affect the amount of compression that you get. So your toolkit should have spare springs, new compression plugs. I just routinely change them out every time I clean and take a gun apart. The cleaning and polishing of that compression chamber, I usually start with 600 grit, but I don't clean the actual compression chamber. That is only for rough cleaning the sharp edges, then the upper portion of the gun. And when you get down to actually polishing in the compression chamber, start with 1,000, take off some paint, maybe go to 1,200, final polish with a 2,000. That's just really up to you and how many hours you want to spend doing that. The real issue here is the fact that the whole gun is covered with this black paint, including inside the compression chamber. And the paint tends to wear and flake off and cause trouble. The best guns that I've seen have had the compression chamber polished. This is a couple hours, lots of pieces of this, lots of taking your 12 gauge shotgun cleaning brush, wrapping a towel around it, getting out there, scrubbing out the paint, going back in with more polishing. You don't want to take off too much material. This is why you're using 1,000 and 2,000 grit paper. You just want to polish off the high spots. Again, this is sheet metal that's spot welded in place, so the weld can leave a high spot, paint drips can leave a high spot. Just the fact that there might have been a hard spot in the metal when they formed it, there can be a high streak in the barrel. Once you get in there and start cleaning, you can look down the shot or down inside with your flashlight, and if it looks nice and round, that's a good compression area. All too often you'll see like a flat spot or a high spot down the sides, and that means your compression chamber isn't all that round. It might not be a gun that's going to polish out perfectly and run real good. I have seen problems where people have put their forearms in, and there's a difference in the dimension of this wood where this slips together, and people will tighten that down way too much. Well, that is in effect tightening down you're bending in the area of your compression tube, and that changes the pressure on the side of that metal. So when you're tightening the screws on your forearm, there's no advantage to over tightening them, and there's sure a disadvantage to warping the shape of your compression plug. Once you get it sanded and polished, then you're going to have to put some kind of lubricant in there to grease the compression plug. This happens to be a red grease that we're trying right now. I've had pretty good luck with a number of lighter oils. I guess the thing to remember is that every time you cock the gun, it takes a big breath and sucks in some dust, and the compression tubes need to be cleaned at least 2 or 3 times a year. Now, we're coming up on our state tournament here in about 3 weeks, and all the competitive guns are going to be coming through the shop in the next 2 weeks. We'll take them apart, clean them out, put in a new seal, re-oil them, and get them back together so they can shoot a couple matches before the state tournament. They're a high maintenance thing. Just get used to taking care of the internals, because that is what having a polished compression tube will give you consistent velocity, and that is the whole key. If you've got a plastic piece rubbing on paint, add some dirt, add some old grease that's picked up a bunch of dirt and compacted it all in there, you'll have problems when you'll start noticing your BB gun doesn't seem to have as much snap when it's slowed down. That's a sure sign of a dirty compression chamber. You've got to take it apart and clean it. The one thing to keep in mind when you're lubing your compression tube is that any oil that gets into your shot tube and then onto the BBs is very, very bad for your accuracy. You want your shot tube to be clean and dry, and if you've put oil in your compression plug, you have to get that cleaned out before you go to a match. So oil it lightly, and then after you shot it 15 or 20 times, take your shot tube out, be sure there's no oil getting into there. Literally, I have seen oil in a shot tube cause a sandbagged gun with a perfect hold to be 5 scoring rings out of center because of the oil. So oil in your shot tube is a bad thing for accuracy. The one thing to keep in mind when you're lubing your compression tube is that any oil that gets into your shot tube and then onto the BBs is very, very bad for your accuracy. You want your shot tube to be clean and dry, and if you've put oil in your compression plug, you have to get that cleaned out before you go to a match. So oil it lightly, and then after you shot it 15 or 20 times, take your shot tube out, be sure there's no oil getting into there. Literally, I have seen oil in a shot tube cause a sandbagged gun with a perfect hold to be 5 scoring rings out of center because of the oil. So oil in your shot tube is a bad thing for accuracy.